following Answers for Elders podcast features author, innovator, Alzheimer's and dementia family coach, Faith Marshall. And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders. And we are here with the wonderful dementia coach expert, author, published author, you name it, Faith Marshall. And Faith, I'm so glad you're back, and I am really excited to talk about this hour's topic, which is we're going to talk about families and siblings and kind of the whole unit around someone that may be suffering with Alzheimer's and dementia and how to be most supportive as a family unit. And so, Faith, welcome back. I know you work with a lot of families, and, this is a really wonderful topic for us to talk about.
Yes. Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's always a joy to be here.
Well, I love having you here because we have... one of the things that happens when somebody's diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, it affects the entire family. And especially if that's the matriarch or the patriarch of the family, maybe they are the pillar of the family, things kind of evolve around mom or dad's house. And all of a sudden mom gets Alzheimer's. What happens typically? What happens in a family when that goes on?
Well, when it happens, typically the family has started to notice some symptoms before the formal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through this fear and denial, and everybody's not always on the same page. The person who's dealing with the patient most is more aware of the different contrasting things that can happen. There's a whole list of 10 symptoms that people can watch for, and there's a lot of help around that. But what typically happens is it's your mommy, and you don't want this diagnosis, and we want to fix it. And so in my case, there were 3 of us, and my dad said, there's something wrong with your mom in the head. That was his explanation.
Yeah.
And she was looking for a dog they hadn't had for 10 years. And so we started paying attention, and it was a few years before we had the formal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And in my book, I talk about my trip to Phoenix with mom, and I titled that chapter Forgetful in Phoenix, because that was the moment in time when I realized that this is real. Wow. This isn't, all my denial had to be parked aside when she looked at me and started talking about her daughter. And I was like, wait a minute, you're looking right at me, and you're talking to me and telling me about your daughter. Mm-hmm. And so each person has their own emotional experience with that diagnosis. And so it takes a little bit of time for families to get on the same page and figure out how to deal with it, because they're not all at the same starting point.
Absolutely.
So helping them get there independently as well as a group. There's usually someone who steps up, like you did with your mom. Mm-hmm. You just decided that's what you needed to do. And you did a huge pivot to do that. And
so many of us do.
Yeah. And statistically, 60% of caregivers are women. Mm-hmm. Part of it is the demographic and the age and whether they worked outside of the home or not and all of that. I think we're way beyond that in this current times, but there's still a little bit of those assumptions. That
I think it's expectation too, in a family. But I remember when my mom was having to be taken, quote unquote, taken care of. I remember, first of all, my mom and I never got along as my growing up. We were like oil and water. I was my dad's girl. My mom and dad were divorced. So she resented the fact that I was like my father.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. And I remember just feeling like every time she would call, it was sometimes I feel like it was nails on a chalkboard, because there was so much criticism and negativity and, that type of, my mom was very demanding and very, just very, things had to be a certain way. And I was so opposite to her. She was reserved. She was controlled, as a person. She was soft spoken. and here's me out there, right? So what was interesting though is I remember the shift in me when I walked into the ER and saw her laying on a gurney, and when she had broken her pelvis,
Mm.
and they had to send her to a rehab and all these things that had happened. And I had driven up from Seattle to Anacortes, to my hometown, and I saw her. And I remember that feeling of all of the angst that I felt before kind of just left me. It was
Yeah.
like, I don't know what happened to me magically, but there was something that happened to me where all of that just made no difference. And it was like, now it's the time for, and I almost saw her as like this fragile little bird,
Yeah.
that I needed. Do you relate to that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. It is. There's like this threshold when you cross over it and you realize that they
Mhm.
do need help, and this is not intentional. This
No.
is just something that has happened, and they need help and they need support. And we do. As I've said, you pull up your big girl panties and you just do it.
Yeah. You
And
just do it.
and I'm grateful for that and that awareness when we recognize and we honor that our loved one needs something they didn't need before. And yeah, it's you stepped over that hurdle of a relationship issue, and that is so common.
Mhm.
It's like it's it's a shift. It's an emotional
Yes.
shift, and it's a whole different part of the grief process of watching someone vanish from who they were to who they
Yeah.
are, or
Well,
who
and
they
and that shift within that family caregiver, let's just say that person's made that shift. We're talking about siblings. The whole
yeah.
balance of the family changes. The dynamic changes because, little sister may say to big sister Molly, "Hey, you never took care of mom or never got along with mom. Why are you now all of a sudden stepping up to do this?" Or, there's all these different types of dynamics within families that happen because
Right.
everybody's changing and the landscape is changing. Is that
Yes. Very much so.
okay?
And so the families have to first get over that sense of denial and fear. And
Mhm.
the fear lasts for a long time, quite honestly, as
Mhm.
each new phase happens.
Mhm.
But they need to kind of figure out, what can we do? Can we pull together? Who's working full time? It's like starting a business.
Yeah.
It's looking at, what are your strengths? What are you good at? My brother was great with finances, so he immediately took over all the finances and the banking and all of that. And then another one was counting pills and making sure the pharmaceuticals were in order. And it was about sharing those duties. And it didn't mean that that person had to be actively present,
No.
caring, but you can manage remotely. And it's just navigating that and getting all on the same page. And I can honestly say it does not happen quickly for
No.
many families.
But I think it's also important that everybody feels like they have a role
Right.
um, in the process, and certainly, with what you do to help facilitate that. Tell me a little bit about how you work with families to help that out.
Well, the first consult would be just, how many siblings are there? What are they good at?
Right.
Where are they at in this process? Where are they geographically? And help figure out. And it's a lot of listening to start with,
Mhm.
because it could be, Johnny got the new bike. I always got his hand-me-downs, or all
Yeah,
kinds of
exactly.
stuff comes up when we start dealing with our siblings.
Now, do
So
you do that oftentimes with the senior present or not? Or how does it depend, or how usually what is the typical
there's
routine?
usually one person that reaches out first, and it's usually the same person that stepped up to do caregiving.
Okay.
Or it's the sibling who wants to make sure that their big sister can handle it and they're concerned about it.
Mhm.
So it's mostly just navigating who's on first,
Mhm.
who's going to help manage things, how are we going to do it, and how are we going to communicate.
Mhm.
And in some cases, depending on the stage of diagnosis, it's good to talk about all of those things that are going to directly affect the loved one,
Right.
and have them participate as long as possible. You're not going to take their car keys away without them knowing it. You're not going to all of a sudden take over paying their bills. There's a dance between who's going to help and how they're going to help, because none of us want to have our independence taken away.
Yeah.
So it's
Well, and I think communication is so vital right now.
Right.
In everything, that everyone's kind of open with what's happening, and so that there's an ongoing dialogue, and certainly you can help facilitate that.
Yeah. And I encourage people to use like a Google spreadsheet for finances, so everybody knows where the money's going. Money is typically a big concern. They don't know how much money mom has, how she's going to pay for it, and just keeping it out in the open, instead of one person being accused of, why does she need to have her nails done every week? And things like that came up with our family. It's because she still enjoys it,
Right.
And I think the big thing is, like you said, communication. We used email so that we weren't verbally discussing things in front of the loved one. So mom didn't hear us fighting, because then they still pick up on that energy. Even if they may be at a stage where they don't understand what they're saying. If you're having harsh words with a sibling, the loved one will pick up on that. So there's so much to this, and I'm excited to share in these episodes today how we can help families.
Well, and we are very excited, obviously, to have you as a team member on Answers for Elders Radio. And to each and every one of you, if you have family members that are taking care of a senior loved one, it doesn't even really have to be that they have dementia. There's all different types of issues that goes on in a family as a senior may decline in health or things like that. Or maybe you just want to utilize Faith for just a touch base consultation. You actually do some consultation.
I do. And
tell us about the consultation that you do.
For Answers for Elders, I have an offering for a $200 gift certificate that you can use for your first consultation with me, and see if I can help you. And it's listening to you, seeing where you're at, where your loved one at, what the situation is, and just kind of sleuthing out how I can help support you. And I would love to do that, Suzanne.
Well, I'm excited to talk further about this hour. And everyone, Faith will be right back in part 2 right after this. We would like to thank you for joining us in this podcast. Faith is here to support you and your family on this journey. She will help you to come together in harmony, creating the best team in advocating for your loved one's care. So call Faith at 855-363-2484 to receive a $200 gift card just by mentioning that you've heard these podcasts. Again, that number is 855-363-2484. And guess what? That spells Faith, 855-3-FAITH.